There are a ton of really great reasons why doing a PhD is good. It could be that your job requires one for promotion and you get a real return on investment. It could be that you are genuinely passionate about the area of study you're about to enter. It could be that you want to work under a particular academic and you've sought out their team and you're ready to go. Great reasons. There are also some very bad reasons, and one of the worst ones is prestige. Now, prestige is a strange one because when people say to you, oh, you've got a PhD or you're going for a PhD, you get a little warm feeling inside. The thing is once you enter that little bubble, once you enter the PhD world, everyone's got a PhD. Like even in my job in industry where I was doing explosives chemistry, there were hundreds of other people with the same qualification in chemistry that I've got, and the prestige really kind of, the shone wore off. And so if you're doing it because you want to be known as a doctor, or you want to be known as a PhD student, or you want to be known as, the clever one, the prestige component only lasts for so long. Once you actually go through the trouble of getting a PhD, you really start to wonder why you're doing it, and prestige is never enough to push you through to the end, I can guarantee it. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstapleton.com.au/newsletter. The link is in the description. When you sign up, you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks. Everything from the tools I use, how to write the perfect abstract, the podcast I've been on, and more. Sign up for that exclusive content only on that email list completely for free. I'll see you over there. Happiness is another terrible reason to be doing a PhD. Now, it's a very easy thought trap to get stuck in. When I do this, then I'll be this. So when I do a PhD, then I'll be happy. And often it comes from kind of a feeling deep down inside that you're not clever enough, that you need to prove yourself in some way, and that by doing a PhD, you will be happier once people know that you're a PhD and you've been able to do 3 years or 4 years or even 10 years of research to get this very sort of prestigious, in some eyes, qualification. So happiness is a terrible reason to do a PhD, because throughout the course of a PhD, you will not be happy for a lot of it, for all sorts of strange reasons. Your PhD will not be smooth sailing. Now, when you enter a PhD, you think that you'll only be tackling that one big question. Oh, no, young one. You will be tackling loads of problems that you never even thought existed. And the constant battle, the constant being judged, the constant feedback from your peers can make a PhD very, very stressful. And for some, it can bring on depression, it can bring on anxiety. And so if you're doing a PhD because when, then, if thought has set in, it's definitely not going to work out for you. So if you're only pursuing a PhD because you think it will make you happier, there's a lot of downtimes in the middle. And it's very hard to weather if that's the only reason you're doing a PhD. Another terrible reason is that you don't really understand what a PhD is, and you have kind of romantic ideas about what a research environment is like. Now, if you think it's going to be an extension of your master's, or even a little bit of summer research that you've done, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. And that's because a PhD is like nothing else you've tackled before. It's always strange to me that the system that creates PhD students doesn't actually train them very much for the realities of research. And it's not until you do proper research on your own under a supervisor that you start to realize what it is. You can kind of get a taste in like master's research, in summer scholarships, but until it's your project and that you are doing new things, it's really hard to kind of get an idea about what it's like. A lot of people sometimes think that it's like sitting down and having like that eureka moment and then pursuing it and telling the world, and the world loves you, and you run down the streets naked. You can do that if you want. But it's not that. It's hours in the lab, it's grind, it's hours thinking, wondering whether or not you're doing the right thing, but pursuing your sort of research nonetheless. That is what a PhD is like. This channel is all about it. And I'm not here to put anyone off doing a PhD. I'm here to share the reality. So if you're not sure, go check out my channel and you'll see what a PhD is really like. Doing a PhD because you think it will make you richer is another terrible reason. Now, when I was doing my undergraduate, when I was doing my masters, all that sort of stuff, my parents were like so proud of me because they really had no idea about what I was doing, what a PhD really meant. And they were like, wow, you'll be so rich at the end of this. And I used to think, oh, I'll be so rich at the end of this. And that is not necessarily the case. Like, I did go into industry, and because I had a PhD, I was able to access, I think, a higher pay scale out of the gate. But ultimately, there were still people that had been there without a PhD, without anything resembling like a university education, that were earning far more than me doing jobs in the mines. And so getting a PhD isn't a ticket to higher paying careers necessarily. That said, one of my friends in the UK did actually have a higher pay scale activated when he got his PhD. He was in the medical physics field. So money can be a good sort of motivator for doing a PhD as long as you have a sort of dedicated sort of project that allows you to access higher career options in the career you're currently in. And sometimes those higher pay scales can even be accessed with just a master's, which is a lot less stress and is a defined kind of program that will kick you out in 1 to 2 years. So yes, money is terrible if you think it automatically kind of gets you a higher pay scale, but money can be a good reason if you've got a system that requires a PhD to get more money. Direct return on investment. Now, this was one that I saw over and over again, and that is people following the path of least resistance and not knowing what else to do. Once you enter the university system, it's kind of like a little bit of an extension of school. You start to get warm and comfortable, and then you realize that passing exams is relatively easy as long as you go to the lectures and revise diligently. Doing the active recall method was my sort of like silver bullet in that. And then you realize that, oh, all these people do want me to do a research sort of like thing. So I'll just do that. Maybe I'll do a master's. Maybe I'll do some scholarship thing. Maybe I'll do a PhD. And, you know, once you're on that kind of like path, it's just so easy. It feels great. And if you feel like that path of least resistance is kind of like allowing you to slide into a PhD, you should stop and be like, what other options do I have? And what does a PhD really cost? Go ahead, check out my other video where I talk about the opportunity cost of a PhD. It's not something a lot of people talk about, but ultimately a PhD happens in those sort of like foundational and early stages of a career where you lay the foundations for kind of like growth later on in a career. When you do a PhD, you're essentially halting yourself at a scholarship level, and you're not laying the foundations for adult life. You're not sort of like putting money in the bank for compound interest. You know, a lot of my friends that ended up becoming electricians or plumbers or, you know, just going and doing a job ended up looking much more adult about 3 years later because they'd had 3 years worth of wages that started to grow. They started to buy houses. They started to get nice cars. Not that that was really interesting to me at the time, but it just certainly showed me that there was more than a time investment in a PhD. I was missing out on all of the initial earning that sort of results in compound interest later on. So you do have to stop and think about that. And if you are on the path of least resistance and you've got a professor that's like, come with me, come into my lab, you're so clever, yes, and you don't know what else to do, stop and think about all the other things you could do. It won't be comfortable moving out of academia, especially after you've been there for a long time. But for me, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And I love what I'm doing now. And it really didn't feel sort of like comfortable at the time. I lied to people when they said, what are you doing? And I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing science communication. And that didn't kind of really work out the way I thought, but that's life and you kind of go through it. Anyway, I'm rambling. Don't do it if it's the path of least resistance. The last terrible reason to do a PhD is if everyone else around you is doing one. Now, I've got an example from my PhD. So this person joined the lab as a research assistant. They loved their job. They were helping PhD students. They were running instruments. They were just a real fun person to be around. And they were hanging around loads of PhD students who were a little bit younger than them, but not much. And they were like, you know what, I'm going to do a PhD. And that's because the supervisor kind of was like, well, you're in the lab anyway, doing all these things. You might as well get a PhD along the way. But it's very different. running a lab, you can leave it at work. The moment you do it for a PhD changes everything. And the only reason they were doing it is because they were surrounded by PhD students. And likewise, if all of your cohort in your undergraduate are doing a PhD, you can be like, well, maybe I should do a PhD because I'm just like them. I'm just as clever. I'm just as whatever. I should go and do that. But that's not always the case. In fact, I did a year abroad, and someone in the cohort that I did the year abroad with didn't do a PhD. They ended up going into industry. They earned money right away. They progressed quickly in their career. And I think overall, they benefited from it because they realized that a PhD wasn't for them. It wasn't for them just because everyone around them was doing it and it was like the natural path. They went out, and I don't think they looked back. Sometimes I wonder if they think, I should have done a PhD, but I think looking at where we all are now, 10 years later, I think they're absolutely comfortable knowing the fact that they made the right decision. So there we have it. There are all of the worst reasons for doing a PhD. Let me know in the comments what you would add to that. And also, go check out academiainsider.com. That's my personal website and my project where I have my ebook, The Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as my insider forum where we help each other become better academics. All right then, I shall see you in the next video.